One of the all-time great Canadian play-by-play announcers, the voice of the Red Wings, Ken Daniels, and overcoming personal tragedy. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today hails from Toronto. He is a graduate of York University, has worked for CJCL Radio, a former reporter and anchor for the CBC, hosted Maple Leafs on radio, covered two Olympics in Formula One racing, host, reporter at Hockey Night in Canada, 28 years, play-by-play for the Detroit Red Wings and co-founder of the Jamie Daniels Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Ken Daniels. Ken, good
Joe,
to see you, my
great
friend.
to see you. Nice seeing you.
Been a
Nice
long
seeing you.
time, man. Been a long time. We go back a ways.
We do. But you were on about 20 minutes after I was done. I think by the time I got home, I could see you on a good night. After I left CBLT late
That's
11:25, I'd be
right.
gone, but I'd be home to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't start the show till 11:30, which was crazy. Crazy. Yeah, but it's
Yeah. Yeah. Nowadays, yeah, it's a totally different world. And I'd go home and some nights be pissed and say, why didn't we have that story? Or why didn't we have that? Although I think on the late show, you probably had more time than I did. We usually on a good night, it's funny. And you know what the sports guys are like? We need a fill. Can you take 8 minutes when normally you had 5.5? Oh, we lost the story. Can you take the other three? So, we'd be at the end of the show and you just babble to a news person who probably didn't care what you were talking about. But anyway, as long as you filled time, they were happy.
You know what? When I first started there with doing the weekends, I remember Christine Bentley turning to me and saying, "Okay, so for the early show, you're going to have 10 minutes, and for the late show, you're going to have 20 minutes." And I said, "Okay, whatever. I'll
Right,
fill it. No problem.
right.
Working
Yeah.
flying solo, working." I remember my first show. It was 1984. The Olympics were on. The Jays were playing. The Argos were playing. This is my very first show. It was just insane. I barely made it there.
And how nervous were you? And could you even watch that recording back?
Well, I did eventually watch it, but it was yeah, I was nervous. But the thing was, I was so rattled by trying to get it all together. I had editors helping me. Both my editor Bob Oda was helping me rip scripts so they could hand them all out.
Yeah.
And but we made it there. We always did. Sometimes
Always did.
a little bit late, but
We
always
were Yeah. We were on church and we had to run across the road to Jarvis. And one night,
right.
before the day of key fobs, or the door was locked, you couldn't get in, or the gate was locked, you could hop the fence. And you're like trying to time it. I'd leave CBLT on Church Street at like 11:12 because you're on at 11:19, and you run across the street and just hope you get there and you go in. And that was part of the excitement. It got the adrenaline going. That
Oh
was
yeah.
somehow you did. You always got to air, and thank for the editors because they were wonderful and just cut it. And I'll lay my voice. I'll do it live, as nervous as you could be. But yeah, somehow we always got to air with some good people helping us.
Oh, thank God for the good people helping us. But the energy level because of that was always up here, right? Which is pretty good.
Yeah,
So
right.
I want to
Yeah.
ask you about your getting into the Toronto into the broadcasting business. How and why did you decide you wanted to be a sports broadcaster?
I believe probably going to bed listening to Dave Hodge in the World Tonight on 1010 CFRB. Just that voice, and as well watching Brian Williams on TV. And
Hmm.
not until about the age of 8, my parents would send me to bed early and the Maple Leafs were playing, and you always got Toronto. Once in a while, you get Montreal and Danny Gallivan, but I just love the hockey aspect of that, just play by play. And then they'd send me to bed early. Maybe I was mixing up Keon and Kelly. I'm not so sure. Maybe I was getting the numbers wrong. They didn't want to listen to me.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'd go up and I'd sneak that little, and I still have it here in my office, a little yellow Panasonic Twist radio underneath my pillow. And then I'd listen to Foster on the radio, or later Ron Hewitt in bed. So I think it was just ingrained, and I'd fall asleep if the Leafs were on the coast and the game was available, or I'd flip the KMOX 1120 in St. Louis and listen to Dan Kelly, and
Wow.
I'd fall asleep into play-by-play. So I'm thinking I literally, the kids use literally a lot these days, but I literally dreamed my job. And I just was enamored with watching the sports and Brian Williams, and he's talking about sports. I'd wait for the Toronto Star to arrive at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on front doorstep so I could read all the scores from the night before. So I don't know. I'm just in love with it from the age of 8. That's what I wanted to do. There was a National Institute of Broadcasting course you could take at age 12 or 13. I went down there, I read in the microphone, and sure, they probably wanted the money. Maybe it was a great organization. I don't know, a great school. And I wanted to do that at 12 or 13. My brother in law took me down, but it was about $700 at the time. My dad didn't want to pay for it.
Wow.
So disappointed. But I thought I could do it. What did I know? You don't know what you don't know. And I was 12 or 13, wanted to do it, and probably starting, Joe, from the age of 8, I wanted to do it. You?
Yeah.
Same?
So, well, no. Well, see, growing up in Edmonton, I had a choice between 6:30 Chad. Uh, what was the other one? 93. I can't remember the call letters, but I didn't have a lot of choices. There weren't a lot of choices. There was, oh yeah, there was also CBC, but television was Al McCann, and it was Ernie Afghanis, and yeah. So we kind of the choices that we had. Of course, the network stuff as well. But was it always going to be play by play, or was it any kind of sports gig was going to be good for Ken Daniels?
Any kind of sports gig and I love the radio. I was fascinated with the radio and Dave Hodge and Jeff Ansell, who's passed away. His sister-in-law was one of my best friends, and growing up, and she got me down to see Jeff at Chum FM, and he'd do the midday report and that deep voice that Jeff had. I'm Jeff Ansell, and I just,
Uh,
the Chum report, and I just loved listening to him. And then at supper time to watch Brian, and I just wanted to do sports. And I wrote Brian Williams a letter by this age. I'm 17 and was still enamored with doing it, but didn't know how to do it. I had, I think it was Willow Downs Cable. Actually, one of the guys who was one of the weather guys at CFTO also was on Willow Downs Cable. Jacobs was the last name.
oh yeah, yeah. Steve Jacobs. Steve
Yeah.
Jacobs.
So he was also in Willow Downs Cable. We were both there. I had a show called MTHL Weekly, Metro Toronto Hockey League Weekly.
Uh huh.
And because I was a referee in the MTHL, so I interviewed referees. John Gardner was president. I brought him in again.
Oh yeah.
I think I was grade 12. Back we had grade 13 as well, but you didn't even have a recording device then. No, we wouldn't have, because those really came in around 1980. So this would have been 75 or 76. And my parents had the television show recorded on a cassette tape. And I wish I had it.
Right.
I never find it. That was my first time on television. I thought, okay, I did okay. It was the thrill. I could type. Joe, this is before really we're in the computer age, and the
Right.
grade 8 typing course I took was the best course I ever took. And I mean, it served me such a great purpose through life from grade 8 or 8th grade, as we say, whatever it is. Now I'm in the US. So I just thought that was so cool. And I think I wanted to be, because of Brian Williams and listening to Dave Hodge. I believe I was just more into doing sports. If I could do TV or be a sports reporter, never thought really about play by play. That came after.
So, how did you end up getting the gig at, first of all, CJCL?
Well, CJCL, I had started at CKR CKQT in Oshawa. I had worked for a
Okay.
good friend of mine's dad in the sales business. They sold wicker furniture and plush toys. And I hadn't even started yet, but I'd interviewed, I'd sent some tapes to radio stations just on my own, and just said, you know what, I had to sell myself. I had zero experience. I was turned down in Penetangue Machine. They were only offering $600 a month. But I didn't get the job there, and disappointed. And then I went out to Oshawa because Rayfield White. You remember the name Rayfield White? Rayfield Wright
Who?
might have been Rayfield Wright. Rayfield Wright with the CFTR. John Hinnon was there.
Rayfield Wright.
Rayfield,
Okay.
yeah. And again, I grew up listening to Brian Williams too, and Dave Wright, and Rayfield White maybe at CFTO at CFTR, and now 680. And he said, you know what? Through Jeff Ansell, I got his name and then someone else's name, and I called everybody. I'd open up every door. They'd often be closed on me and kick me out, but I'd call anyone. And he said, why don't you go up to John Hinnon, said, phone this guy in Aurelia, which was Rayfield. He said, I don't have anything for you here, but call this guy Mark Orton in Oshawa. And I did. And I sold myself. And the night before I went, My dad and my brother both said, my dad said, I sell real estate, sell yourself. And I did. And I told Mark, I
Right.
want this. I know I have experience, but I want this job more than anything in the world. And he called me and he said, you wanted this more than anything. I'm going to give you the opportunity. And I was lousy. I screwed up the name of General Motors. And I heard our president of the radio station walk by, and it's in my book. I can't remember his name now, but whatever his name was, Jim. And I called him John or something. And all I could hear
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
those supposed walls of a soundproof booth. They weren't soundproof because I heard him say, "That's not his name. Who is this?" Like, I'm in there doing the news. I, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But anyway, that's where I got the job in Oshawa, and I was there for about 10 months. And I applied for the overnight job at CJCL Radio in Toronto. And Larry Silver, who I love,
Yeah.
and I was so to, yeah. And Larry was just as funny as could be, and I loved listening to him. And here I am in his office, and I again sold myself, just saying, I know I'm green, but how much I wanted it. And he called me about 2 weeks later, and he said, Ken, I'm going to give you the job. All I can offer you is 2 tickets on the TTC and an overnight shift. So that's how it went. And I said, I'm in. And I did overnights for around a year there with John Oakley. John Oakley was the overnight.
Sean Oakley. Wow.
Yeah, John Oakley. He and I worked together for over a year at that old building that used to be CKFH, CK Foster Hewitt, CJCL. And that's where you got the chops. And then you had to go to the police station in the morning, get the police reports, write up stuff in the morning, give it to those guys, Marvin Pewty and the other guys who came from broadcast, J. Michael Phillips, he used the name on air. And oh my goodness, what people, Grant Forsyth, what people to learn from. It was wonderful. It really was. That's where I made mistakes overnight.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, my first gig was. I always want to be sports as well, but my first gig was at Red Deer. Was doing radio news from 5 to 10 at night, and then I did a sportscast on TV at 11:30, which was fantastic.
Mm.
And the whole time I spent writing the sportscast and just ripping and reading from the old, the old wires, just ripping, reading, away we go. By the way, Ron McLean was our weatherman, and he did the
Oh,
afternoon drive on radio,
right.
CKRD.
Hey,
Yeah, yeah.
I remember the night that Ron McLean got his job at Hockey Night coming from there, even though he'd done the Flames, right? Locally,
Right.
I'm at CBL,
Yeah.
and we carried the Canadian Football League, and we'd go on back in the day when they didn't care about spending money, and you'd have all the overtime hours from the union, and the football game would be late. We'd still do a full local newscast after the national, and I see we're waiting for Hockey Night to end because the earlier Hockey Night ends, we can go on. Actually, yeah.
Right.
So it wasn't that night; it was Hockey Night, and Dave Hodge, the night that he threw his pen.
Through the pen. Yeah.
I'm just waiting to go on to watch because we're after the national, and I'm watching saying he's done. Dave Hodge is done. And I went from the sports office into the newsroom and I said, oh my goodness, I think Dave Hodge is gone. I couldn't imagine. I was hoping he'd come back. I love Dave Hodge, and I didn't even know of Ron McLean at the time. But that was Dave Hodge's last night, and we went on the air with the late sports after Hockey Night and the National that Saturday night. And I was just getting in the business at the time, and in came Ron McLean, and there it went.
Well, actually, we have a peek at Ken Daniels. This is Ken Daniels and us folks in Toronto knew way back in 1988. Let's roll that clip, Vic.
In the series now 3-1 following the total embarrassment you are about to witness.
Reagan watched it hit the side of the net.
Trailing 2-1 in the series, the Leafs came out fighting. First, it's Todd Gill giving the Wings Gerard Gallant all he can handle. Then round 2, another fight. Al Secord hooks up with Jim Nill, but the strategy backfires as Detroit counts first. Adam Oates skating out from the corner, slips a backhand inside the far post. Oates third on the power play, 1-0 Wings.
Of course, at this time, you have no idea you're going to be a Red Wings announcer down the road.
No.
What are your
And
thoughts
Jim
when
Nill.
you see that young fella? Yeah, Jim Nill.
Well,
right?
Jim Nill, and working with Jim Nill. Well, even though I have the mustache and goatee now, I was trying to do the Tom Selleck look back then in the 80s. I know you at CFTO, you weren't allowed to have a mustache, were you?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Well,
Clean cut.
you know,
That's
and
it.
before they hired Jerry Dobson, I had applied and went in and did a did it on camera at CFTO, and
Yeah.
Pat Marson said,
Audition. Yeah.
Yeah, and Pat called me after, and getting to know Pat later and working with him at the Fan, he probably didn't give a crap, and God, I love Pat. But he called me up and he said, Ken, I don't know why they didn't hire you. I had you, man. You were in my corner, but you know what? Maybe they didn't like the mustache, and I don't know whether Jerry had one at the time and he shaved it. I think he did.
Yeah.
Was he global
He did.
before and shaved the mustache? Yeah, he
Yes.
shaved it, and I
He
had
was
one.
he was
Yeah.
on Sportsline with the stash, and the deal was when he came over that he had to shave the stash, so he's willing to do that. But I don't know. You know, but when you see that, when you see that young guy, what is what are you thinking when you look at that guy?
Well, I had a lot more hair there. I realized that, we used to put down just to get a breather when you did the sports and you'd lay down the voice track before. Now it would be so uncool to do that. You just got to do everything live. And it's more fun doing it live. But then what I think about is a young guy there who was trying to get through it and, had everything laid out perfectly. And I think if I knew then what I know now, it'd probably be much more at ease. But it was okay. And it was the time. And you knew when people were watching, and boy, you had to be bang on. It was the only way people were getting their highlights back then, right? It was before the cell phone. You could see them in local sports and some.
Yeah, we could never scoop highlights. We used to get them from George Michael's Sports Machine and then re-edit them. And it was really tough to get. It was tough to get same day highlights. Yeah.
Yes, can I tell you, George Michael's Sports Machine. So, and you may remember the name, I'm Michael Stone for NBC News.
For NBC News.
Would be on. Yes, he was George Michael's producer. I come to Detroit in 1997 and I'm listening to the radio, and I don't know if it was the Fan at the time. Now it's the Ticket or whatever it was on AM at the time. And I'm listening. I'm driving into Detroit first few days here, and I hear Stoney and Wojo, Bob Winowski, the Detroit News, and does a lot of radio, still writing, and he's wonderful and a good friend. And Mike Stone, I go, Mike Stone. I used to air him on highlights just to break it up a voice package and sometimes cut his name off at the end, sometimes leave his name on at the end.
Yeah.
You had those 5-minute shows on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, which were going into Windsor, and you're putting stuff on you maybe would have never put on, but you're filling time. And Mike did a nice job, and I'm driving, and I called the radio station. I go, and I tell him the story. And now we're friends, and he comes over here to the house in the summertime and at the pool. We golf together. And that's Michael Stone for George Michael's Sports Machine. He moved from DC and came to a fixture here, just retired, semi-retired. He still does radio, but so well respected here in Detroit.
That's crazy. Small world, man. That's pretty cool. Okay, so you get to Hockey Night in Canada, and you get a chance to host a few times, including a playoff game between the Leafs and Blues. I believe this was circa 1990. Let's check out that one.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ken Daniels, standing in for Ron McLean, who is set to rejoin our broadcast team on Friday night for Game 2 of this series from St. Louis. This telecast marks the first of 2 months of continuous championship coverage as we trail the Stanley Cup on Molson Hockey Night in Canada here on CBC.
So I think that was Todd Gill give you the tap on the head. Yeah.
Todd Gill. And I didn't know, and I'll tell you, the story behind that. I was down there for CBLT local to cover the Maple Leafs playoffs against the St. Louis Blues. And the night before the game, I'm already in St. Louis for CBLT. And I go to my hotel room and the light is flashing. It's Mark Askin. Me and John Shannon, best producer I've ever worked with. Mark is just amazing. And I had the lights flash in the room, and Mark says, Ken, Ron had to go home. We believe Carrie, his wife, had a miscarriage. Ron had to go home. He left his Hockey Night in Canada jacket. We're going to pin up the sleeves because they're going to be too long. But you're hosting Hockey Night in Canada tomorrow night, and you'll host Coach's Corner with Don Cherry. So I got no sleep that night, believe me. And the next day, and they all knew how nervous I was, and the Leafs knew, and I'm down by the room, and that's when Todd Gill gave me the on the top of the head. But I'd sort of calmed down a little bit by that time because at that about an hour before that, we pre-taped Coach's Corner because going to different regions, right? So it was the Leafs show and I was asking Don Cherry predictions. And he said we had taped this at like 4:30 in the afternoon. So I'm my first coach's corner, and we got through it. And then midway through the first period, we're sitting in what would have been called the green room. And Don says, Kenny boy, we're going to have to do Coach's Corner live. I go, what? We're not doing it live. Well, the Leafs didn't come out like I thought they would. St. Louis owned the first period. We're going to have to do it live. I said, Don, I can't do this live. He said, don't you worry. I was great the first time. I'll be great the second.
Well, it's
And we
interesting
did
you
it.
say that, Ken, because we have you hosting Hockey Night in Canada in the intermission and Coach's Corner. Let's have a look.
Favors Canadians.
That's a toss-up. Patrick Roy, I would never vote against Patrick Roy because he's dynamite in the playoffs.
Okay, Rangers Islanders.
I will take Rangers on that one just for pure talent, although you got to give Al Arbour a lot of credit for getting them in the playoffs.
Washington the Devils.
This is the one that I'm going on the long shot. I am going with Washington, I cannot believe.
No one in their right mind would pick Washington.
Well, I'm going with Washington because I look at Mike Niute, I look at their players. They were lousy in the season, and I say they're going to come through in the playoffs. Before, in the past, they always had a great season and lousy in the playoffs. This time, I'm saying they're going to come through.
Okay, Don, thank you, and thank you for taking it easy on the rookie.
All right. See you, Ron.
Don Cherry in the Coach's Corner. Molson, Hockey Night in Canada on CBC continues after this.
Yeah, he did seem to take it easy on you, didn't he, Ken?
He did, and I think what I said, no one in the right mind thinking I could get a reaction out of him. But then again, what was I thinking that I could say that to Don Cherry then? You know, so
Right.
You don't know what you don't know, but you're in the middle of it, and I had to go live, and that was a live one to Ontario. I think, and the rest of the country saw whatever he said the other time, but that was live in Ontario for the broadcast. So that was my indoctrination to Hockey Night. And at the time, that's really what I wanted to do. I hadn't even really thought about play-by-play then. It was, going from CBC and getting the job there through an audition, and then finding my way to Sports Weekend, filling in for Brian Williams, who I'd called on the phone, just wanting to watch him do his work 10 years earlier. Now I'm replacing him on Sports Weekend when he's away. And then got to host Hockey Night in Canada. And that would have been, I guess 1990. And I hadn't even thought of play-by-play then. I just wanted to be the third to Ron McLean or Steve Armitage or Scott Oak, whoever was hosting. I just wanted to be in the mix. That's where I got the start.
So how did you end up getting the gig in Detroit?
The gig in Detroit, I with John Shannon, first of all, I was doing Maple Leaf Radio for about 3 years. And Alan Davis, who was the program director at CJSL and The Fan, right? And he said he needed someone to fill in for Bowen because it was Paul Romanek was filling in for Joe Bowen. Romanek couldn't do a game, and I was moving. It would have been around 1989. I had just bought a house, and Alan called me. It would have been the 2 nights before, and I was moving the next day. And Alan said, can you do Maple Leafs radio? Because I was working at the radio station. I was working at CBC, and I was filling in for sports at this new venture that was becoming The Fan in Toronto. And Alan said, can you do the Maple Leafs Bruins? Joe, I'd never done a hockey game before in my life, but I'd done the Olympics in '88. Alan gave me a lot of tips about that, every sport. I wasn't doing hockey. I was doing baseball, canoeing, cycling, velodrome, everything, road racing. And Alan said, can you do the game? And I said, gee, Alan, I'd love to. Now, this is play-by-play. I'd never done it. Leafs Boston, Maple Leaf Gardens. And I said, Alan, I can't do the game. I have to move. And Alan said, get somebody else to move your effing ottoman. I'm offering you Toronto. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? Alan, you're right. So I did the game and went to overtime, which is the last thing I needed was overtime at that time. And I think Andy Brickley, I think, got the game winner. And years later, I wound up working with Andy on NBC game with Andy Brickley from Boston, who's still doing the Bruins games. So I had done Leaf Radio, still doing Hockey Night. Got let go from CBLT Local in December of '96. So I hired an agent, Maury Gossfran, out of New York, and I sent around my tapes, and he sent play-by-play from Maple Leafs Radio, where I had Maple Leafs Radio and Hockey Night, Joe, because John Shannon had come to Hockey Night in 1994. He was going to be the executive producer. I'd met him one time on the road when Dave Hodge, this is how this world all comes around, right? I grew up listening to Dave Hodge. After the Minnesota game, I'm on the road at the old Met Center, the multicolored building. And we all went for dinner after because we didn't fly out right after the game. We're staying at the Marriott across the road. And I went for dinner with John Shannon, who was the producer in Minnesota, for Dave Hodge, doing Minnesota North Stars hockey. So we went out for a drink after, and I got to know John a little bit. And sure enough, some 3 or 4 years later, he hears I'm auditioning for the job in Vancouver radio, of which Jim Hewson, he was number one. And if Jim wanted to go to Vancouver, he'd have the job. Sure enough, he did. But John called me and said, Ken, I'd like you to take you from hosting to play-by-play on Hockey Night in Canada. I'm coming back as executive producer. And I said, holy crap. Now I wanted to do play-by-play because I was doing Leaf radio. And he, one thing you have to promise me. I said, John, what's that? And he said, no bad habits. You have to leave the radio. Meaning too descriptive on TV, left wing corner, right point, center point. Pictures tell the story. And I said, John, I could do that because I knew the radio station was losing the rights. So I was out of work anyway. I said I could do that. So I'm getting the long-winded answer to how I got to Detroit was then 1997, the playoffs, and I'm working through Hockey Night now, play-by-play through those years, 95, 94, 90, there's a lockout in there, 96, 97. And we're doing the playoffs, Greg Miller and I, going from Toronto to Buffalo, going back and forth in the first round. Buffalo was playing Ottawa. So we did that entire series. It turned out to be a 7-game series. Derek Plant got the winning goal in overtime for Buffalo. And now his son, Max, was just drafted by the Detroit Red Wings. And we were communicating on Instagram about dad scoring the goal. So that was it. So at any rate, we did that Game 7. And while I was there doing Game 7 of that series that Mark Askin was producing, Dave Strader, the late, great Dave Strader, we lost him too early, cancer. And Dave came in. He had been working year previous to that in Detroit with Mickey Redmond. And he walked into the booth, our Hockey Night booth, and he said, hey, Mickey Redmond's met you a few times, and he wanted me to let you know they're going to let go of the guy who replaced me in Detroit. And Dave Strader said, get your tape in. So I called my agent. I got my tape into the Red Wings. That next day, I was going back to shoot a movie at Skydome with Tony Danza called The Philadelphia Phenomenon, but a garbage field goal, whatever. So I was going back to do that the next morning. The Detroit Red Wings, I want to get a tape to these guys. And all this happened in the span of a day. And really, that's how I got the job in Detroit after negotiating, whatever. And Fox was taking over. They were coming on to Detroit. So a new branding was just the fact that Dave Strader walked in. I met Mickey Redmond twice before, just like I met John Shannon and Dave Hodge, who I grew up listening to once before. And it's all the people you know along the way. And that's why I always try to pay it forward now, going all the way back to Brian Williams. I mean, my goodness, it's just people, and you wind up replacing them as you go. And if you just take the steps and listen and ask questions and learn. And that's how I got the job with the Detroit Red Wings, was sending in a tape thanks to Dave Strader and having met Mickey Redmond. I interviewed there. There were a lot of people who interviewed for that job, and I was very fortunate to get.
Wow, so a lot of incredible things happened along the way. The people you met, the one-offs here and there and everywhere, and all of a sudden there you are getting that gig. Yeah, I think that the radio rights for the Leafs went to Q107 for a while. Isn't that what happened or something
I
like that?
think, yeah, I think they did. It was either at that time it was either Q107 or CKO for a short time.
Yeah.
Remember CKO, the all news station? Then we thought, how can a station survive with only 3 letters? Everything was always 4 at the time. We're missing one. But it could have been, Joe. I don't remember. It could have been CKO, and Peter Maher was maybe doing play-by-play for them later, the Calgary Flames, and retired a few years back. So, yeah, they'd lost the rights, so it worked out perfectly to learn with Hockey Night. And then when I got offered the job in Detroit, I had originally turned it down because John Shannon and I, just the night before, had gone out and we had a handshake deal on a new 3-year contract to continue to do play-by-play, even though I wasn't working local CBC. I was still doing network. And John offered me a 3-year stay. And then the next day, they were going to put out a press release, and I've got reporters phoning me from Ken McKee and Rob Longley and asking me for a quote, staying with Hockey Night. Not that it was a big deal, but it's going to be a short note in their column. And meantime, the Red Wings are calling me. I'd already interviewed with him. But this is now September 4th, 5th, 6th, right around there. So I
Wow.
waited all summer. And I agreed to stay with Hockey Night. Hadn't heard from anybody. Then they offered me the job. And it was only for 2 years, not 3. And I thought, to move my family, I don't know. And the Hockey Night offer was good. And Arthur Smith. You remember the name Arthur Smith? Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith.
He was the executive producer of the Olympics on CBC television, then went out to head up Fox in Los Angeles. Arthur Smith later took over, and he's got a wonderful book called Reach. And that's the story of his career, and just self-made. What a guy. And he went out and later took over Dick Clark Productions. And all those shows, those ninja shows and everything else you see on TV, that's all Arthur Smith. But I worked for Arthur and Bob Moyer doing the Olympics. And Arthur went out to Fox, wanted to bring me to Fox Detroit to do the Red Wing games, and I turned down the job through my agent. And the next phone call is Arthur Smith on the other end of the line saying, do you know how friggin' hard I worked to get you to Detroit, and you turned down the job? What were you thinking? Are you kidding me? And anyway, 10 minutes later, my agent called me and said, they gave you 3 years and more money. You going now? I went.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I called,
awesome.
I called John Shannon from the front porch of my house in Midtown Toronto. And I was living up at Bathurst and Wilson area in Toronto. And I called John, and I was in tears because letting him down, and Alan Clark, who was head of TV, said, don't worry, I'll handle Alan. I can only maybe offer you 22 of 27 weeks on Hockey Night in Canada. You got a chance to do 80 games plus in that year. And I also did college hockey. I did 101 games that year. He said, the only way you're going to get better is to do more games. And John said, you have my blessing, go. And I did. And, you know, in this business, Joe, how many people were let go, and great people, and who left. And, you know, Bob Cole hung around a long time, as he should have. He was the best. We're all waiting.
Yeah.
We're all in behind Bob, and Chris Cuthbert was there. And so I knew I was always going to be before. I wasn't going to get that opportunity 10 or 15 years later. And what happened at the CBC, you saw how it all went. So I think the decision was right. Yeah.
Well, and you know what, Ken? You got to win some Stanley Cups with the team you're calling for. So that was pretty cool. You know, you also had the opportunity to have a special guest on one of your broadcasts. And apparently this was the first time he had ever seen you call a game in person. Let's have a look at that one, Vic.
Did you love listening to Foster Hewitt? Did he bring the pictures to you?
Oh, yeah. He was great. As a matter of fact, he was your inspiration. When you were 7 years old, you saw Foster Hewitt, you said, that's it. That's what I'm going to be. And that was the end of it.
And I want to thank you for that, too, because you always said follow your dream and your passion, and that's what I did, and I thank you for that. Did you play a lot of street hockey when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah, we did. I got to tell a story about we never ran out of hockey pucks because we used to use horse droppings, which froze in the street. It's silly to talk about it, but it was fun.
That's what you did because you were poor. You didn't get to many games at Maple Leaf Gardens, did you?
No, I only got to 1 or 2. That's all.
Well, but you know what? And you knew Charlie Conacher, didn't you, a little bit?
Yeah, he used to come into my store in the Danford. Big guy, nice guy. Yeah, he was a...
One final thought. You look at the players here, first time you've been on the bench. What are they like compared to the old days?
Well, they're faster and bigger, and that's about it, you know.
Yep. Well, Dad, thanks.
Better equipment.
There you go. Thanks for doing this, and I look forward to having you next to me and Mickey in the booth tonight.
Me too. I love you, kid.
Thank you very much. John, there you go.
Wow.
He was, you know,
cool.
Joe, 90, born in 1915 it was. He was 93 at that time. And living on his own. And my mom had passed some years earlier. And later he had a girlfriend later. And I'll never forget, they were moving to another apartment. He was living on his own, and they were getting set up to move into another, you know, old aged home together. And I said, "Are you moving in with her?" And he said, "Oh, hell no, I've done that for the whole life. I'm not doing that." That was my dad. So 2 weeks before he had a stroke in his condo, because he was living on his own, he'd walk a mile a day. He was still driving. But Ken Holland, our general manager of the Red Wings for a long time, and he became GM one year I moved to Detroit. He'd been with the organization for a while. And Ken said, "I'm going to scout in Toronto. We have some days off. Do you want to come with me?" And I'll pick you up and you can go in and see your dad. And I said, that would be great. So I drove into Toronto. Ken drops me off and I spend time with my dad for a couple of days. And we went shopping that night. I drove him that night. We went shopping and he's in the supermarket and he holds it up and he says, no one my age should be buying green bananas, should they? And I said, no, probably not. So he was 96 at the time and still living on his own. And 2 weeks later, I got the call in Buffalo, again, sitting with Ken Holland, watching Sabres morning skate. The Red Wings are going to play that night. And I did the game that night. But they flew me home after the game back to Toronto for the funeral. So my dad was wonderful. And years before he was born in Toledo, Joe, moved to Toronto when he was 8. And unbeknownst to me, early in the 90s, he got his U.S. citizenship back, and he surprised me, and he said, just in case you ever work in the United States, I want you to know this will be easier because your dad got a dad now who's an American citizen. Sure enough, it was, because it helped with the green card in 97. I got citizenship in 07. But as he said there, that's what I wanted to do as a young kid passion, as he verified that. But my parents would always say, follow your lead. Do what you want to do. They never questioned it. I'd be in the bathroom reading the newspaper out loud. My mom would go by and say, oh, Ken's practicing to be a sportscaster again. And so I thank my parents, and I wish all parents would do that. Trust the kids sometime. If they got a passion for something, that's what it's all
about. Yeah, beautiful. You know, my dad was a Red Wings fan, and, you know, towards the end of his life, he wasn't doing great health-wise, and he came to visit me in Toronto and with my mom, and we went down to a Leafs game, and Bob Stellick set it all up, and my dad got a chance to come into the dressing room, and then he got a chance to come up to the press box and everything else. It was just such a cool, surreal moment, and he, you know, getting a chance to be there for the Leafs and Red Wings was pretty cool. But yeah, it sounds like Ken Holland was an excellent individual, right? To work for.
Oh, just as wonderful as could be. And we would, there were afternoons when the team wasn't going well, and you know, and you know, have morning skate on the road. But Ken and I used to call it hot stove. Let's hot stove. I mean, you know what hot stove is? Just sitting around and shooting shit. And Ken would say, "Let's hot stove." And I said, "Well, you going to morning skate?" He goes, "Morning skate? I don't even want to watch him play tonight. Forget going to morning skate." So I said, "Okay." So we'd go. We'd have breakfast, and there was one day we didn't go to morning skate. We'd go for a walk, and about 11:30 we'd go and have a coffee, and then we'd have lunch. And by about 4:15, he'd say, "What time's the bus?" And I said, "Well, 4:45. I haven't even done any notes today." He said, "You'll be fine." We go upstairs, we each go to our own rooms and get ready and get on the bus and away we go. We just spend the whole day just talking, or we'd sit on the phone and just for hours. And I learned so much. You think at the time in Toronto, Joe, when I was doing Maple Leafs radio and working as you were at CFTO and I'm at CBLT, and we got to deal with Cliff Fletcher and Pat Burns. And then I go to Detroit and I get Jim Devellano, who you've had on. You've had on Scotty Bowman, from Scotty, and Ken Holland, and just amazing to have those people around you to learn from about this great game and see how they handle things. And you don't have to always agree with everything, but boy, I've been around some greats of the game. So wonderful to be a part of it.
Well, let's take a look at some of your work with your old pal Mickey Redmond. Let's listen to some of those calls.
Again, everyone. Nice job, Tilley. Ken Daniels alongside Mickey Redmond.
And Chris Chelios.
I know, he's a Hall of Famer. He can do that stuff, right? Threw it back in. Zetterberg. Shoot it quickly. Scores! He does! A buzzer beater! 2 nights straight. Now the Red Wings win it. 4-3 in overtime. Down at center. Filppula's back in. For Datsu. Back to Filppula. Yes. Valtteri Filppula. 2-1 Red Wings. 7:28 to play.
What a play by Pavel Datsu on a backhand.
Right from the face-off, Red Wings control. Kronwall to Zetterberg. Scores! Game over! Game 7! Here we come!
And just missed. Moving up Whitney. Whitney circling. Free to go. Eiser. 2 seconds. Score!
to give the Red Wings their home opening win.
Listen to this crowd.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's your favorite call? Was it there? Was it one of those, or is there a call that you that really that
Well, the
you
one
felt
from this
it was your
past
most favorite?
Well, Pavel Datsuk on a breakaway in Dallas from Brett Hull. And I said, put that in your highlight reel bank. And that was just anytime Pavel did something. Pavel setting up Henrik Zetterberg with seconds left in the game. That was amazing. That one you just showed to Steve Yzerman. For a long time, I remember that one because under 2 seconds left, it's a home opener against the LA Kings. That one sticks out in my mind. David Perron scoring with virtually no time left to tie up the game in Montreal when, for the moment, the last game of the season, this past season, we thought we still had a chance. The Red Wings did to make the playoffs, and then one scores in an empty net and beats Philadelphia, which we found out 30 seconds later, just before we went to overtime. So that balloon just went, and we were excited for a few moments. That one, and Patrick Kane returning to Chicago on Chris Chelios' retirement night, and Kane going back to Chicago for the first time. And he gets the winning goal and the break set up by DeBrincat in overtime. So that one's turned out to be my favorite now, only because it got so much play. And at the time, I didn't think other than what a great moment. But I love watching Patrick Kane. To watch him, Datsuk and Lidstrom and Yzerman and Fedorov, it's been pretty damn good. We've been spoiled and we're spoiled. I came in, I don't know whether it was 20 years of the 25 straight years in the playoffs, and now missing for 8 straight. It's hard, but we try to have fun on the broadcast. I love working with Mickey. As I wrote in my book, I said every night Mickey walks into the gondola and he says, "Kenny boy," it's like he's saying, "Honey, I'm home." And we've had a 27-year marriage with, other than the first year trying to feel each other out, never had a disagreement on everything. We'll talk during the off season. I talked to him today twice for 15 minutes, just about things going on or what we got to do. And I love him like a third brother, and I got my sister too. But Mick's just Mick. He's like Don Cherry, what you see with Cherry, you know how he was, and that's how Mick is. And he's put a smile on anyone's face. You can walk through a crowd in Detroit. He's Don Cherry, what he was in Canada. But you go anywhere in Michigan, Mick. It's just coming here, honestly, Joe, just riding his coattails. And I was the new guy coming in. He'd been here. And after a year or so, I think we just hit it, the cadence. We could laugh at each other. And we go in every night. And some tough years, the last 8 years. But you got to have fun. And sometimes you got to deflect from the game that's not going so well in front of you, but you got to entertain. And often when those nights happen or you lose 8-1 and Mickey leaves and he says, "Well, we earned our money tonight, didn't we?" Because we can fun, not make fun or light of what's going on, but tell good stories and have a laugh. It's sports after all. It's supposed to be fun. It's not life and death. And,
Right.
You and I have both seen what that is. So just have fun with it, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, we know about life and death because we do have something else in common, and that's we both lost a son to a fentanyl overdose. Tell us about Jamie.
He was fun. He was gregarious. He loved to laugh, and that's why for our foundation we do roast. There he is with our previous dog Puck in the basement. Puck would be a great partner for him and his sister Arlen. We lost Jamie at 23 years old. He loved hockey, loved basketball too. Was a pretty good basketball player, and he had a little height on me. Actually, he hit I think 5'9" or so, which was big for our family. But he loved to laugh. A good kid, a big heart. And so many friends. And that day when his funeral, on December the 11th of 16, when he passed, one of the worst snowstorms we've had in Michigan in years, and that was when Mickey had the cup. We were young. That was the last picture we had together in Florida on the ice. He was in rehab in Florida, and was 228 days of sobriety. And days of sobriety matter. And scrupulous doctor there, who's now was sentenced to 20 years in prison, was reduced to 12. But that whole place where he was staying, where he shouldn't have been staying, doctors who duped him and gave him Xanax when you you could never give a recovering addict Xanax. And they did. He felt better about himself, and he should have known not to take anything. I'm absolving him from him. But that home, and people ripping people off with free rent just so they could go through the whole cycle, what is called patient brokering. You go get blood tests, and I was
Mm-hmm.
getting bills for $50,000 for pissing in a cup. I mean, it was unbelievable and how fraudulent it was. And we had over 60,000 of bills. Some people had millions because they just get you to a place where you think you're in a sober home. They send you for testing. The doctors built the insurance industry, and the whole sober home, which isn't, gets paid off. And Jamie was in that sober home, should have known, not so sober home, should have known to take nothing, but he did. And the pill he took was laced with fentanyl. And they waited to clean up the place, stole his shit. E60 did a report on that on ESPN, and they waited an hour before they called the meds, and he was already gone.
You know, there was a piece that about Jamie, that story that aired a while back, and we're going to just pull a clip from that. Vic?
If someone loses a struggle to that deadly disease, cancer, for example, they've lost that valiant struggle, and yet someone who dies of addiction is said to have died in an alley alone with the needle in their arm, and that is not the case. Scott said to me, and I'll never forget, he said, you don't know right now what this is going to mean to you in the long run. You don't know right now what your calling is in all of this, but you will find it.
And that's Scott Oak.
We're talking about Scott Oak. Yeah. So, you know, we had Scott Oak on the show. He lost his son Bruce to an overdose in 2011. Scott has taken his son's legacy to the next level with the opening of the Bruce Oak Recovery Center in Winnipeg, a very successful recovery center. Here's Scott talking about that incredible.
We expect 180 or 200 men each year to pass through Bruce Oak, and every one of them, we hope, will be able to get their lives back. That may be asking too much because there is a failure rate in recovery, but everybody's got a chance there, right? The Bruce Oak Recovery Center offers hope, and it offers hope based on two cornerstones. One is a continuum of care. You can stay in the program for as long as it takes to get it right. It's not 21 days, 45 days, 90 days. It's however long it takes to get it right. And that could be a year, it could be 2 years. And the second cornerstone of it is those who can afford to pay are not turned away because they're covered by a combination of social assistance and fundraising. So no one's left behind at Bruce Oak, and it's our son's legacy.
Now, you talked about the scam that that exists, and the way that drugs are distributed, and the way the medical profession handles things. And what are you started the Jimmy Daniels Foundation with your wife and your ex-wife. Tell us about the foundation's goals.
To end the stigma surrounding addiction. As we say, one life lost is one life too many. And it is about prevention and recovery. And they talk about, now we're just at a conference, about ineffective education strategies and like putting on like one-time events or personal testimony from people in recovery. They're viewing that now as not as effective as it could be with basically social learning and learning at a young age and coping skills. And we see bullying now and what you can turn to. So through the Jamie Daniels Foundation and We Write Grants, we're in how many middle schools now in the area, many different areas here in Oakland County. And we're teaching mindfulness programs, yoga, so that kids know if they're stressed out, if there's any bullying involved, how to handle yourself. It's mental wellness. We talk about the disease and addiction and mental sickness. We like to refer to this as mental wellness. So you have coping skills. And those from this conference seem to be that we're on the right path because these are the effective strategies, teaching kids at a younger age and coping skills. And that's what we're doing now through yoga in the school system. As well, at college, we have the Jamie Daniels Foundation has issued grants, more than 700,000 in grants since we came into existence roughly in 2018, 2019, until we found our way. And Jamie went to Michigan State, and that was the first program. So we provide 24/7 counseling. There's a dorm. In the dorm, there's a floor for those who are recovering. If they have to leave and come back, we can cover their expenses. There's a Jamie Daniels scholarship involved as well. So we're in 9 Michigan colleges now offering that program at different levels of grants, whether it be 50,000, 25,000, 15,000. We're writing grants through our fundraising efforts. And And roast, back to your question about Jamie, because he loved to laugh. So that's why we do roasts. We did the Lidstrom and Holmstrom roast this year. It was the toast of Nick Lidstrom, because you couldn't believe the roast of Thomas Holmstrom. We roasted Scotty Bowman. Would have been live. We would have loved it, but then with COVID, we couldn't. We did that virtually. And the roast of Brett Hull, again, we did virtually. The NHL people who just step up. Darren Pang helped host that one. We've had Dave Hodge host a couple of times with Scotty Bowman in the first roast, with Mickey Redmond and Doc Emmerich. The great Doc Emmerich has hosted a couple as well. So just been wonderful. The live events were great, and overall, each of those events, we, raising more than $300,000 from those events. People have a wonderful time, and all that money goes out for the grants and the recovery programs. And we also, at Children's Hospital of Michigan, here we have Dr. Matt Lacasse, a wonderful psychiatrist. It's the Adolescent Addiction Recovery Center, known as ARC, here in Troy, Michigan. And regardless of the ability to self-pay, and like Scott Oak said, nobody's turned away, but family counseling is there. And we've helped so many come through the doors there. We wish there were fewer. Then again, they know the door is there, whether you can afford it or not. So those are the things the Jamie Daniels Foundation has done in Jamie's name. And you probably say Spencer's name a lot. I love to say Jamie's name a lot. I try not to say him or his or he. I'll always say Jamie, because it's always music to my ear. And you'll see the note here. It's sort of like the music note. Jamie, to the point that one day Eminem is from Detroit, and he's been in sobriety now, I don't know, 12 or 13 years, and his foundation gave to us as well. And it was so wonderful. Jamie and I had the argument one day. He goes, Dad, Eminem, Marshall Mathers, Eminem's way more talented than Paul McCartney. He said he's way more talented than Paul McCartney. You know how deeply that hurt me? So we'd have arguments like that.
Words,
but,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we'd have arguments like that. But he loved that, loved music, loved sports. He was thinking he wanted to be a sports agent at the time. That's what he wanted to do, was studying for his LSATs in Florida when he was down there and in recovery. He was studying to take the LSAT. And it happened. He never got there.
Yeah, it is really important to say Spencer's name and remember him, and and it's like I've been sober a long time. I've been in recovery for a long time. I know about the addiction, and it brought me down pretty hard, and obviously brought Spencer, Jamie, Bruce down hard. So now I go to speak to people in the rooms of recovery. I go to speak, at a treatment center in Toronto, addiction rehab Toronto, and when I speak, I share Spencer's story. When he was in an aftercare program, he said that he wanted to maybe eventually what he'd like to do is he'd like to become a counselor. He'd like to help people get sober and stay sober. And I said, son, you'd be an awesome counselor. And he does that with me now. It's like when I'm there, I feel Spencer's there. And together we're sharing his story, we're sharing my story, and together we're working together to make, to be part of the solution, right? To be part of the solution.
And Joe,
I was going to ask you
Joe,
go ahead.
You say, Joe, when you go to those events, and I'm speaking to, and Jamie's mom speaks, and when we go to these events, and I still do think speaking is important. With the other stuff we do, I think the personal stories are important, but isn't it something, and you probably feel this too, when someone comes up to you after in that audience, and not everyone has, thankfully, but many have lost, that's why they're there, or have one that's struggling. But when someone comes up to you, whether it be a father, it could be a father, mother, grandfather, anybody, right? That's why we tell, if granddad has hurt his knee and he's got pills in the house, get rid of them, because kids will go looking for that stuff. So it's like having a loaded gun in the house, get rid of that. So we talk about that. Again, when someone comes up who is lost, Joe, and they hug you and they say, can I give you a hug? I lost my son or I lost my daughter. Feeling that hug like no other. And you just know when it goes right through both of you, because they know people can say, I can't imagine. You're right. You can't, until you've gone through it. And those people who can come up and talk about their loved one that they lost, and I can talk about Jamie, there's just something, and it makes you, it's comforting. It makes you feel better. You're in it together.
For sure. It really does. And the the there's something about being in service to others and being having Spencer be part of that piece. But I want to ask you, have you seen signs? Like, do you get signs from Jamie?
Oh yeah, all the time. It's just my 1111 has always been our sign, and I've gone to we've gone to a medium a few times for my mom, my dad, and for Jamie, and my daughter went there, and she talked about how Jamie that night, my daughter was struggling a bit because she was really tense about an exam she had to take, and Jamie called her from Florida the night that he had passed and left, wanted to talk to her, and they talked and tried to talk her off the ledge herself, and left a rambling voicemail, and we met with the medium later. She said, "Arlen, is there a voicemail on your phone from Jamie? It wasn't quite coherent. He was rambling. It's exactly what it was." And she still has it to that day. So I know that he's there. I remember the night that I talked to him after we had come back and beat Winnipeg. And I called him after most, not every game, but I called Jamie after most hockey games. And I called him. We were in Winnipeg, and with the time change, they were an hour later than us. And he said, "Boy, you guys were horrible in the first period," because he tried to watch the Red Wing games from Florida, where he was in recovery.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, we came back and won." He said, "How the hell did you do that?" So I told him the game story, and I said, "Where were you?" And you're always in the back of your mind, you're a little worried, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "I was out painting the wheels of my car black." And I said, "Oh, no, you didn't." He goes, "Dad, trust me, you're going to love it. I'll take pictures when I get to work in the morning." He was working at a law firm. He was a clerk at a law firm studying business. And he never got to work in the morning. We didn't know, actually. We knew the name. We didn't have the phone number. We thought we knew the name of the law office. They didn't know for 2 days where he was. He didn't show up. We finally had to call them. And then flowers came to our house, and they were just beside themselves. They just loved him. But that was, there was another kid when he was in that home that wasn't sober, and he called me, Joe, and I said, "Where are you?" He's at Target. He said, "Jamie said, we're at Target." And I said, "What are you doing at Target?" He said, "Well, this kid, who I think wound up patient brokering him to get him from this other place at a meeting to come live there, and he probably got paid for it, even though later on the 60 piece he didn't admit to that, but I think he did. But Jamie had him at Target, and I said, "What are you doing at Target?" He said, "Well, the kid's got no money, Dad. I'm buying him some T-shirts." But that's who Jamie was, and just met him, and he wound up as his roommate in that house where he'd pass in the bed right next to him. So, yeah. And somehow, Joe, we carry on, right? And what you're doing in Spencer's name is amazing. What Scott's doing in Bruce's name, and I got to tell you, when Scott had that, we took his blueprints. We tried to do that here. It was just, and then we pivoted. We were going to do a recovery home as well. It was a lot of red tape. We thought we had a beautiful 40-acre property we had, and thought it was all set, and someone else backed out. And Scott, I think, told you what, 12, 14 million dollars probably they had to raise for that in Manitoba. Amazing what he did. And seeing it sounds silly to say we're envious, but he's helping people, and what he did in Bruce's name is wonderful. And now you're doing what you're doing, and we're doing what we're doing. So you find your own path. And as Scott reached out to me after Jamie had passed, because yes, Bruce would have passed, I guess, 4 years earlier. And as I said, you heard, I don't know. Scott said, "I don't know what your calling will be, when you'll be able to speak of it, but you will find your voice." And I did. And I thank him for that. And I love Scott. He was so wonderful to me. And again, that's like that hug from a distance even. And I flew out to see the hockey night in Winnipeg. I think it's called, the fundraiser he does. And actually, tomorrow's date, August 22nd, I think is Bruce's passing date. Jamie's December 6th, and we know how hard it is for you on Spencer's date and the birth dates. And they never go away, but
October 14th.
Yeah. Time doesn't heal, but it does allow you to get some good thoughts in there. That's what it does over time, and what we're doing in our kids' names.
Yeah, we had owls. Owls was a sign from Spencer. 3 days after he passed, an owl flew over our backyard. I'd never seen an owl before. There it is, flying over our heads, and then there would be numerous owl sightings over time. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah,
that was the other one. I'm glad you reminded me, because it's a cardinal, and our medium had told us a cardinal, and I have a cardinal artwork here, which people got for me in the office. So it is a cardinal, and I do see cardinals sitting outside. Even when we bought this house, and I'm with my wife, she's a realtor, and we were bidding, and we came to our previous house, and we were filling out the offer because it had to be in late. We came home to our house, and we wanted this. So when that we're in now. And we looked outside, and there's a cardinal sitting on our fence right outside the window. And she turned to me, and Becca said, we're going to get that house. I said, yeah, I guess so now. So that, you're right. I'm glad you reminded me. The cardinal 2 and 11 for me is the sign for Jim.
Right. We've even asked for a sign for Spencer at a tree where we had spread some of his ashes. We said, our wife said, Spencer, we'd like to see a sign. I said, we'd like to see a sign. She said, we'd like to see an owl. And I thought, that's kind of a heavy ask. It's a big ask. Yeah. I mean, I'm open to a sign. She wants to see an owl. We take about 50 steps, and there is a big, great horned owl in the tree in the woods we were walking in. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. That kind of thing happens again and again and again.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I believe
it's
it
great.
all the time.
Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah.
Well, Ken, this has been awesome. I wanted to mention, you talked earlier about, getting the word out to kids at a young age. The work partner with a group called Believe, Become, Be You. It's a mentorship for kids from 10 to 17. And it's so important to get that message out to kids and also, just to listen to them and to, let them know what's going on, help them to understand. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love it. And I knew that's what you were doing. And I so admired you. And I didn't know about Spencer's passing till after Jamie's. And I called you, like in 2018 or whatever it was, or 19 years after.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't believe it, how our small family that we knew one another. And we all have this happen, but we're doing good things in their great names.
This is great. Oh, one last question. What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received. That's a good question. Probably just to be yourself, if you can be. I mean, certainly in our business, and to pursue everything with a passion. And I think I've done that. I've always said I've lived my life by the 3 Ps: preparation, passion, and persistence. Although, Joe, I find now the 3 Ps come more frequently between midnight and 7 a.m.
You know what? Persistence is helpful. And you come a long way from selling wicker furniture, my friend.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And
thanks
for doing this. Thanks for doing this, buddy. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
Okay. More when we come back. Thanks, Ken.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Rely on Walton Restoration's 40-plus years of excellence in residential and commercial restoration. Their strong reputation is built on workmanship, professionalism, and outstanding customer service. Trust Walton as your dependable partner in emergencies, serving Durham, Kawartha, and Northumberland regions. Call 905-725-5666 or visit waltonrestoration.com. Experience top-tier workmanship and service. Walton Restoration, the trusted name in property restoration. Join satisfied customers like me.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at believebecomebu.com. That's believebecomebu.com.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, and Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network, Buzz TV Live, and Zingo TV. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows and clips are on there. Like and subscribe. It's absolutely, positively free. Thanks once again to Ken Daniels for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.